A Sith Lord, a title that carries as much weight and reverence as it does fear and impunity. Ever since a few years after the 100-Year Darkness, the Sith Lord has been a terrifying ruler of absolute darkness, returning every couple of centuries to wage war on the Jedi, as well as the established Republic. However, our tale takes place far before this, way back in the days of old, long before the second great schism of the Jedi Order and the creation of the Sith religion. The Sith pure-blooded species that lived on Korriban had a much different idea of what a true Sith Lord meant. This was not merely a rank to be achieved, but a title and a symbol of rulership that was meant to be forcefully taken. Way back in this day, these were known as the Sith Kings. The Kings of Korriban, before the time of Ajunta Pall the Dark Jedi, and the Dark Jedi as a whole, is not widely known or very much talked about in Star Wars lore. But my friends, if you have been on the channel for some time, then you know that must change. Today, acolytes and students of the Force, we will be excavating the tombs in the Valley of the Dark Lords, and going beyond the Sith Lords of ancient times in order to uncover the truths about the Kings of Korriban. The kings who were so powerful in the Force that they created entire systems of magic and alchemy, and forged dark side blades and artifacts whose power has continued to echo throughout time for many millennia after their deaths. There were thousands of Sith Kings in these people's history, and many of them have different achievements and contributions to the dark side that Ajunta Pall's Dark Jedi laid claim to when they seized rulership and plundered the tombs of the ancient Sith for themselves. For this video, we'll be focusing on 3 of the most notable Sith Kings in order to get an idea of how these powerful beings used to operate in some of the deepest and oldest Star Wars lore that we know about. So now, sit back and pay your respects, because in the tombs we now go. First though, according to our star charts, a lot of the ships that pass the channel haven't actually subscribed yet, so if you've been enjoying the daily Star Wars lore, reach out and force crush that subscribe button. Now, let us begin. The first and most prominent of the Sith Kings of Korriban that we must discuss is known as King Adis. The origin of the Sith's own Chosen One prophecy comes from this legendary king. As he was so powerful, he completely reshaped the entire way the Sith species operated within the Force itself. King Adis lived for nearly a millennia before the foundation of the Republic, which would place King Adis around 27,000 BBY. King Adis was born at the time in his people's history where their society was still broken and at war. Just as the dark side mandated, only the strongest can rule. Because of this, many clans and tribes of the Sith people were constantly at war with one another. Using their Force-imbued terrifying blades and axes, they would do battle until only the strongest clan stood, and that only lasted until another tribe rose up to challenge the clan that had just won. This pointless conflict ended, however, when King Adis rose up himself. A Sith male standing taller than even the largest of their kind, skin black as coal, and a voice that commanded the dark side itself, and his people as well, with a single roar. King Adis wielded one axe in each hand, and used them to carve a path of gore through any battle he went through. Keep in mind that these massive Force-imbued axes wielded by the Sith people were incredibly large and hefty, requiring most Sith to use 2 hands to wield a single one. Yet, here was King Adis opting to use not one, but 2 of these fearsome, ancient weapons at the same time. The Sith people feared and glorified Adis. Anytime a challenger rose against him, he would drink their blood soup to honor their death, enslaving those who he deemed foolish and executing those who he saw as idealists. King Adis quickly became something of a god to the Sith people. He soon became known as a pure-blooded king, and he ended up unifying all of the Sith tribes under his one single rule. This entire era became known as the Reign of the Axe. King Adis used the dark side to drain life and added onto his own body and his own will. His reign lasted for 300 years, as he only met his end when the powerful Rakatan Empire invaded the world of Korriban. But even then, in his final moments, he killed so many Rakatans that he drove them from the planet entirely before succumbing to his wounds. Starting out, we have now only seen an absolute unit of a being. King Adis truly embodied everything that the Sith stood for, and would continue to stand for 1,000 generations into the future. This is why he was the origin of the prophecy of the Sith Ari, the Chosen One. But now, let us continue into our deep dive of lore and onto the next Sith King, King Kagra-Gosh. Nearly 20,000 years after the death of the great King Adis, the Sith had fallen back to their federal tribal ways, with many Sith attempting to claim the title of the Sith Ari, the Chosen One. One Sith Lord rose up in the year 7000 BBY, and he was named Dothka-Gosh. Gosh and his forces started a civil war within the world of Korriban that saw the deaths of thousands by his hand. Dothka-Gosh was a sorcerer, and not just any sorcerer, but one who had mastered many horrible magics and even pioneered his own Sith spells. He conquered 2/3 of Korriban because Gosh dominated his kinsfolk in a manner that was considered extremely brutal, even by the standards of the ancient Sith. And his endeavors of bloodshed and terror saw countless corpses strewn across the battlefield in his wake, echoing King Adis. Gosh would actually take an interest in said corpses and perfected a spell which was known as the Stwaiwinoka Holukut, which in the Sith language translated to reanimated dead. This spell did exactly as you think it does, and raised armies of zombified corpses to serve and fight for King Gosh. Gosh was so obsessed with Sith sorcery that he actually removed his own heart and replaced it with a crystal that contained pure dark side energies. King Gosh also crafted a helm that significantly amplified the force abilities of any wearer, of course being a practiced hand at Sith sorcery, perhaps the most practiced ever. The power of this item was such that it would cause atmospheric disturbances when removed from his tomb. When used together, the heart of Gosh, which he had removed, and the helm of Gosh would allow the user to literally control the force of nature. The new heart of Gosh allowed him to sustain his life by unnatural means. Despite to have been rumored to be invincible, the great sorcerer would actually meet a rather anticlimactic end by the hand of assassins only about 50 years into his great and massive rule, when he would eventually be succeeded by his own blood in Kagra-Gosh, marking the third true king of the Sith. Despite being a presumed descendant of the famed Dothka-Gosh, Kagra was not as notable as his predecessor and had a rather unremarkable rule. Despite being reported as rather strong in the Force, Kagra would actually be the very king that Ajunta Pall would torture in front of his people, that being beheaded by his own sword, thus marking the arrival of the Jedi outcasts now deemed Dark Jedi, which is an appropriate end to the rule of the Sith Kings and the rule of Kagra-Gosh. So my friends, what do you think of these Sith Kings? Are you interested in the ancient times of the Star Wars galaxy and ancient lore? If you would like to see more videos on these precursor species and ancients, be sure to let us know down below. And as always my friends, be weary and may the Force be with you. And we as always hope to see you in the next video.